I'm Tiffany Souter, entrepreneur, wife, mom to 4 girls, and a woman figuring it out just like you. If you're tired of living a life of have to and finally ready to build a life of want to, then you're in the right place. Come on, let's go build your life of and. This is the time of year where there's just a lot of conversation about bold vision, what we want to build, create, the next step. And I don't think that most women listening actually lack vision. What I see over and over and what I feel in myself isn't that the gap is that we don't have vision. It's that moment of decision. It's that quiet hesitation that shows up right when something actually matters, when there's risk, when something that we have today maybe won't be able to persist because we want this new thing, when you don't have full certainty and when other people are maybe impacted by the thing that we choose, the new. Today, I want to talk about the leadership skill that sits underneath all of that. It's this idea of like self-trust, because I've learned the hard way that you can have the boldest vision in the world and still stall out if you don't trust yourself enough to actually decide in alignment with it. Brian is going to be joining me today in this conversation. Brian Kavicky, if you've been listening for a minute, you know BK is a monthly conversation that I have. He's been a personal mentor of mine for 14 years. And we have, as I said on LinkedIn, we have both fought and hugged a lot over that time. And so, Brian, just excited to welcome you back into this conversation and talk about why is it that oftentimes we get in our own way? And it's actually no external factor that is stopping us from reaching our goals, finding our vision, sort of arriving into the dream that we have for our lives, but sometimes it's inside of us. So thanks for joining me here.
Glad to be here again.
I'm going to start a little bit with a personal story around this. We're getting feedback from listeners that when I put myself in the student seat, it helps them sort of learn alongside. And so I sat down and asked myself 3 questions. What's one bold vision I'm holding this year? What one decision am I overthinking or avoiding? And the third is, what am I actually afraid might happen if I get it wrong? So what's my vision? What am I overthinking? And what am I afraid? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about over like the last 5 years. So, 5 years ago, I pushed record on the first podcast episode with this Life of And project. And a year ago, I stepped out of the agency that I'd been leading for 20 years. And I had a lot of like competence in that job. People knew me as that person. I kind of knew how it worked. I had a team around me. I knew the cadence. I knew what the calendar expected of me. I understood the vision of it. It was like all of these things that I understood. And I made this bold choice to step away from that certainty and into this like kind of project of Life of And in that moment, I had actually very little certainty about what the revenue stream was going to be, how I was going to pay myself, what it was all going to look like, how it was going to come together. And we've unpacked some of that over the last few episodes, just like, what does it look like? And there was kind of this like embarrassment almost of going back to starting again. Like I used to show up at my network as like really capable and confident. I was a CEO and I was all these things and she'd done this stuff. And now I was like going back into startup mode, hustling my network, like being constrained by cash, solving problems that like I had already done, like finding the first dollar of revenue and selling and just like being back in the trenches. And there were times when it was like, man, I didn't fully understand the cost of this decision. I didn't totally understand what it was going to look like in my calendar to do all of these things. And I am choosing growth over the comfort of like what I knew before. And I think even as I sit on the threshold of going into 2026 and I'm finding the vision is more validated, I still, as we talked about a couple episodes, like I want to get to $1 million in revenue this year. And I say it and I'm working on believing it, but I have to make sure that my decisions are aligned behind that. So help me when you see like capable, high-performing women hesitate at like this moment of decision, even when the vision is clear. Like, why does that happen? And where does that come from?
I think the first is, and you referenced it, is that you're ignoring history. And ignoring history is like you're choosing to look at history in the wrong way and ignoring the parts that actually serve you and sort of looking at the things which don't. So you said, I was confident. I was very talented. I knew how to do these things, blah, blah, blah. Well, none of that's changed, except the setting has. And so your brain is going, well, because the setting has changed and the context has changed, then I must not be competent. No, you brought everything that you were into this as well. You're just in a different context, but you're choosing to see it differently. And part of that is there's this hesitation of, and you referenced it at the beginning, is what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I'm wrong? Which is also ignoring history, is how often have you been wrong when you've said, oh, this is my vision. This is what I see as possibility. I actually have a path that I think can get me there. And yet you go, well, but what if I'm wrong? It's this filtering that says, I have to be careful. I have to be aware of what if, and almost none of it is positive.
Such a good point, because I'm not jumping into a new physical body that has no experience. I'm taking all of that stuff with me. And that's part of, as I've gotten wiser in this journey with Life of And, I'm like, I have to go to the things I've spent 20 years learning how to do, because those are the things that can sort of bring success faster. Meaning I'm going to take a B2B sales angle versus a B2C sales angle. Because like, I know how to do that. I've done that for so many years. The speed at which I can accelerate into that is at 10x what I can do on a thing I've sort of never done before.
Right.
So I'm taking that competence. That is a really good point. I think the other piece for me, and let's talk about where this fear comes from, but this idea of like owning the belief being intrinsic instead of outsourcing it. So I would go to things, to events, social events, networking events when I was the CEO of Element 3, and people would ask me not only different questions, but the certainty in their own eyes that I was going to be successful at I was trying was much higher than when I'm like in Indianapolis trying to hustle this podcast thing. Like, how are you making money? And people are kind of like, that's cute. And it would kind of piss me off. Like, no, there's a real opportunity here. There is a real business here. Like, not yet, but there's an opportunity for one. And I would just kind of be like, mad. What is that about?
Oh, well, let's go back to the other point, though, is that okay. You said, as I'm these are my words, not yours. You said, as I was socializing what I was doing, the feedback that I was getting was, that's cute. So one, why did you need to socialize it? And two, what made that's cute valid feedback enough for it to affect how you feel?
Oh, my word.
Because I would argue the people giving you that feedback are doing that in order to not do what you're doing and to make what you're doing wrong. Because if you see an opportunity that they didn't, they're going to feel bad. So the easiest way to do that is to talk you out of something that has possibility so that they don't miss it. And they could be people that, like, you go to somebody and say, yeah, this is what I'm doing with my podcast. And they look at you and go, well, that's cute, but podcasts don't really work for that. And it's because their podcast did not do very well. And they want yours to not do well to validate their position. So when you go out and you validate your position with other people, and people are doing the same thing with you by giving you feedback to validate your position, you're in this weird mix of everybody's validating to their own mechanism. And you have enough humility and intellectual and emotional stability to go, I'm going to take this feedback and consider it. When really you should just go, whatever, I don't care what you think.
Well, that's interesting because I started this whole part of this segment with saying, like, you can't outsource your confidence. It has to come from a place of belief internally. And then the very vocabulary that I used was I was socializing this, which is about kind of like getting market feedback. Right. But if your belief internally is deep and strong, it's somewhat irrelevant what the marketplace. I mean, there's like, obviously you have to have a product and a buyer, but it's irrelevant whether people think it's a good idea or a bad idea. I've got to just go do it.
Exactly.
So we've got this, these big ideas going into next year. And I think even sometimes as high capacity women and leaders, we can even get to the place where we stop believing that great big things are possible because we've had the belief, we've tried enough times and been like, okay, yeah, I went into this year imagining it was all going to be different. I got caught up in the wake of everything just being too much. And so I settled back into what was easiest, which is the status quo of all the stuff I'm doing and the craziness, because the velocity or the inertia that I need to be able to create change feels too hard. And so I just do the same year. Why does that happen?
So where I've seen that happen with Mark, and as I say this, think about times that it happened to you, because I know it's happened to you in the past, is that you have a vision and you have a path and you have a way. And then what a leader does is they go to their team and they say, I have this vision. I see these possibilities. This is what I think they should do. And the team goes, whoa, we're not ready for that. We don't have the infrastructure for that. We can't do that yet. We need these pieces, blah, 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 blah. And you go, okay, I'll take your feedback. Let's go slow down. And then you end up with where you just described of, we're back to this incremental, do those things. But it was the moment of going to the team and saying, what do you think? I want feedback, that actually caused that circle to happen.
I think that can happen in both our professional lives and in our personal lives, actually.
Yes.
Where we go to the team, which is our family, and they look at us and say, in so many words, I don't know how to support that level up. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it happened to me 2 years ago. I had told my family that when both my kids were in college or done with college, we were going to move outside of our neighborhood. We were going to move. And I just declared it. We're going to move. And so my daughter that year, we sent her to college with a packed room and said, when you come back to visit in the fall, you will be at a different house. And the kids were somewhat like, I don't see it. I don't understand why we're moving. This is our home. There's nothing wrong with it. Any of those things. So much so that my son, when we move, did not help at all. And he literally said, well, this is really your house. I mean, I don't really understand it. I don't know how I participate, and sort of checked out of the whole thing. And then fast forward today, they're like, I love our home. I love where we live. It's so much better, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't see it. They didn't know. And they were doing everything of, this is our childhood home. We want to keep things where they're at because we are biased towards the status quo. We are biased to what we understand. And when a visionary comes in and casts a different vision, the rest of the people who aren't wired that way with the same vision go, yeah, but this is what I know. And this is how I think. And I'm not sure. Are you sure you want to do that?
So how do we get through that piece of it? Because I've even, like, real life in my world right now, I have some health goals for myself that I'm finding the practical implementation of those, the time it is requiring, like things like a step goal. A step goal actually is a time thing. To get 8,000 to 12,000 steps a day is like an hour and a half to 2 hours of walking. That is an insane amount of time. You can habit stack and wake up early and all that kind of stuff. But there's going to be some period of time where my kids are used to having me around that I'm not going to be able to be in the house, if I'm actually going to do this goal. And so there's this friction in this silly, silly little thing of this goal that I have for myself, the calories my body needs to be able to burn to be able to get there, and the time required to do that. And it's like, well, is it after school that while they're watching a show, I'm not going to be in the house, which means if they want to drink, they have to get it themselves, whatever the stupid things are? Or is it like, hey, while they're winding down and watching a show before bed, I usually sit and snuggle with them. It's like, am I going to be outside in the dark, cold, getting steps in? Maybe. And I'm playing this game in my head of where is it going to land and what part of their routines am I going to disrupt in season where their routines have been very disrupted. So I have a weird sensitivity to that that's totally self-induced. But there's this friction that happens when we decide we want something, or when there's this friction that happens when we decide we want something, we can, I think, bail on it because where it imposes, where it creates some friction, like you were saying with your kids, like they were kind of put out by the whole thing. Like how to help coach us through that? Like, what do I do? Where do I place it? Where do I go with it?
Okay, so two different ways. So I said we moved anyway. Like, that's it. Like, it wasn't their choice. It wasn't their decision. They gave feedback. They thought it was a bad idea. Turns out they were happy. So I made that decision for them, and they benefited from that. If you look at yours, you're now worried about how it impacts others. But if I called your kids right now and said, hey, how worried are you that your mom doesn't get her steps in 2026? It would probably be pretty close to 0%, which means when I feel bad of how it's going to affect them with people who don't care how it's going to affect them and don't care what your goal is to some degree. I mean, they care about you, but the goal is not important to them. You're going to have to just do it and let the chips fall where they fall. And in your head, you're going, well, but something may give. Well, it doesn't have to, but the most important thing you do is to say, I'm going to get 8 to 12,000 steps a day, and I'm not going to make that or consider how that affects others at all to some degree, because if I do that, I will resent them for not hitting my goals. You will be actually resentful of them if you don't hit your 8,000 steps, because you're like, well, I snuggled with you and that's why I didn't get to do it. So you just got to do it and they will mold.
It's so true. But it goes back to our opening monologue about, in that if our ceiling of belief is the ceiling of commitment that exists on planet Earth towards that goal and vision.
Yeah.
Like, does that make sense? Like my own belief, I was even talking to my wellness coach about this. Tell me if this is all connected. I think it is. And well, okay, backstory. We were packing up all of our house, the last couple of weeks. And so you move lots of furniture and beds and pull up things you've never seen before. And there's crap underneath there. And I threw away just, who knows how much stuff of things we haven't seen in years. And there was this bracelet that was like one of those like kind of Taylor Swift friendship bracelet bead kind of things, like worth 4 cents. And it said the word believe on it. And for some reason I didn't throw it away and I put it on my arm. I was like, I don't know why I did that, but the connection, it was like, that was the thing I did instead of throwing it away. So I've been wearing this bracelet for the last couple of weeks being like, what is this about? Because I am not good at consciously reviewing my feelings. They come to me intuitively like that. Like, I'm like, oh, what is this about? There's something there. And it's about 2 things, I think. One, when I look at my professional, actually both areas of my life, personal and professional, like things are super good. Like things are good. Things are good. I'm like, if I would go to any doctor, they would say I'm healthy, like, all the kinds of things. If I would show people my balance sheet, they're like, that's super good. But I have this vision of pushing through good and getting to great. And I want to know what that next 3%, 12%, whatever it is that's different, like the different, I want to push through that and I want to get myself there. And it is wildly uncomfortable because it's not the same as running from a bear. When things suck and everything's terrible and everything's a mess, it's like for me easier to sort of run away from a bear than it is to say like everything is fine and I'm trying to get into this place of excellence that has been, I think, kind of elusive to me and my personality, and just being like kind of making plan B and plan C work and just like going with it, like, whatever. It's like, that's been a thing for me and I want to push through. And so this bracelet around the word believe is realizing that other people in my community, my friends, my in-laws, my parents, my JR, like nobody is looking at me and pushing me there. It's all for me, by me, this like intrinsic thing that's like, I just got to see if I can. And this idea, this understanding that like my own ceiling of belief that this can happen is the thing that's inside of me. It's nobody externally pushing me or holding me accountable or you telling me that I should do it. It's like whether JR thinks it's important or not, I have to decide that it is. Whether, I guess it's kind of what you're saying. Like, I have to decide and not outsource that belief socially and stick with it even when it's like really, really hard. And I think that can be difficult for me. I'm easily distractible. I like to have a good time. I don't know. Maybe it's hard for everybody, but it can be hard for me to do that.
So it is hard. Uncomfortableness is actually a signal that says it's worth it, because you don't really get uncomfortable about things that aren't worth it. So when you are uncomfortable, it's okay, I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right things. There's something here. But the reality is you may go down this path, and as you are committed to it and taking action and doing all these things, you may run into new knowledge or new perspective or new evidence that you did not have today, where you go, oh, well, that's not happening. And you may stop. So I think the other place that we get hung up is that we go, well, I have to have everything in order. I have to see this yellow brick road. I have to see a perfect path before I decide. And it's like, no, decide and then go with it and believe it. And only if you run into something that says you absolutely cannot do this, I am going to proceed with my decision and I'm going to own that. And what happens is you find out that there's better outcomes, that there was more possibility, that there was other things. And once in a while you go, oh, I'm not going to do that. I had no idea that I'd have to do that. Well, it's an easy choice and it becomes super clear.
I think what I'm hearing from you is that like this idea of trusting yourself is really not about ever having a place of certainty, but it's about being willing to stand behind a decision when an outcome isn't guaranteed and to keep going even when the outside world isn't giving you the positive affirmation or feedback that you're looking for.
The better the idea, the more you're breaking the mold of what people think you should do or what's possible, the more negative feedback you get. In other words, the more people go, that's stupid, that'll never work, you might have something there.
And I think that's true at like every stage in life, because when you're young, you think, well, if you have competence, people will trust you no matter what road you take because you've been successful. It's like, no, there's still like naysayers. Or you're like later in your career and you decide to like reinvent yourself in some way. And people are like, oh, that's super weird. Like some people, a small percentage will be like, that's cool. And a lot of people are like, well, that's insane. Why would you take that risk on? Why would you disrupt things? Why would you whatever? And I don't know, as I'm talking about this, I'm like, why do we give so much power to the outside world?
You should answer that question. Why do you give so much power in these moments to the outside world? Because I don't think you do it all the time. Why in these moments do you give power to the outside world?
I think there's this like social desire for me to like be accepted and to like be okay. Whatever that means. Okay. I don't know what, but you know, like just like, oh yeah, she's doing okay. Like she's inside the acceptable social bounds of the world in which I live in. I think that in my early career, I looked to the outside world because I grew up in a place where the life I chose it wasn't playing out. Like it was in a small town. It was just like there wasn't this sort of environment I'm living in. So I looked at the outside world as like a place for clues about what I was drawn to and what I loved and what excited me and like kind of like what the options were. And so I think that was part of my journey personally. I don't know. Those are the things that come to mind when you ask me that question. Is any of that what you're looking for?
Yeah. And I'd add, I think you're also twisting history again, because if you reference when I would go to events and when I would go to they would see me as CEO of Element 3. I have credibility. I've done all these things. But if those same people at those events had seen you when you were a $400,000 business and about to go broke, would they have said, keep this place open, you'll be fine? Or would they have said, yeah, I wouldn't do what you're doing? Yet they're rewarding you for what you did, but in the face of adversity or unknown, they'd be telling you, yeah, you should be out, because they would exit. And if you look at all the bets you made where somebody told you, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Oh, that's a bad idea. Or gave you advice to go down a different path, because I can name a bunch of those, that you went, oh no, we're not doing that. You were right about all those bets that you made in spite of feedback. It's just that at this point, there's less conviction in what you're doing, because to you, you're still seeing it as an unknown. And you just got to get moving to go, oh yeah, I'm right. I did see something. I see the opportunity. You just get moving.
Well, I feel like I've worked through some of that, but one of the things I've started doing is like practicing my confidence outside of like, hey, I'm just trusting that this is the path I'm supposed to be on. I'm trusting that the right doors are going to open. I'm trusting the right people, and like practicing the confidence that way of, you know, we live in Indiana, and Indiana football is like all the rage right now. And if you go look at like early press conferences with Signetti and what he said, I mean, his ceiling of belief was outrageous. You know, he's
Google me, I'm a winner.
Yeah, Google me. I went like, and you know, listen to that and you're like, well, what an a-hole, you know, what a pompous a-hole. But what would happen in our lives? And then you go look and see what he did in 2 years. It's insane. absolutely insane. And now, whatever, what a payday. But my point, I'm like, what if that was the way it actually felt inside of us? Like, what if that was the confidence by which we were navigating our visions? Like, holy cow, how powerful does that feel? So silly, but I've been practicing that of just like, hey, trusting this is the journey. I'm trusting this is where I'm going. I'm being a steward of the opportunities. I'm showing up with excellence. I'm like doing the things I know how to do. And I'm trusting that I'm going to figure this out. And that's part of the way I'm wearing confidence in this season right now, because to say I know exactly the plays to run and all of those things, it's like that feels like lying to myself. But practicing that confidence has been kind of helpful these last, I think, few weeks and months.
Yeah, because you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to do it anyway. And that is the mantra of, you know what, I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm just going to do it anyway. I've been right enough to know that I'll know when I'm wrong, so I'm just going to do it and make the plunge.
And nobody cares. Also,
nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Maybe the most important question that we can ask ourselves as we start the year is not what do I want? Because I think you already know that. But maybe it's, do I trust myself enough to make the decisions that are in alignment with it, even when it costs me or my family or the people around us something? What is it worth to deliver for ourselves? The vision that we have, like in our heads and in our hearts. So as we wrap up, I want to come back to the questions I asked you at the very beginning. What's the bold vision you're carrying right now? What's keeping you circling kind of a little bit, maybe sort of, what keeps you circling? What keeps you from fully owning this decision? And what are you afraid of that might happen if you get it wrong? Or what if you get it right? So I don't think the work here is about forcing confidence or having everything figured out. What I'm sitting with is this idea that self-trust is built in the moments where we choose to stand behind a decision before we have proof. So, because the truth is, the results we want in our careers and in our lives don't come from perfect certainty. They come from the willingness to decide, learn, and stay in it, mostly when it's hard. So maybe the real question isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you're willing to trust yourself to move forward and let that trust grow through action. Thanks for joining, Brian.
Thanks for listening to The Life of And. This is your weekly reminder to keep making bold choices, saying clear yeses, and holding space for what matters most. As always, if you like this episode, I'd love for you to drop a review and share it with your friend. It's the fastest way that we can grow the show. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next time.